March 1945. The war in Europe was entering its final brutal act. Hitler's armies were collapsing on all fronts, yet the fighting grew only more desperate. The Rhine River, broad, cold, and relentless, was Germany's last great natural barrier, the final line before the Allies reached the heart of the Reich. On its western bank stood the ancient city of Cologne, Cologne in German. Once one of Europe's proudest cities, home to more than 750,000 people, it now lay in ruins. Years of relentless bombing by the Royal Air Force and the U.S. 8th Air Force had flattened nearly everything. From above, it looked like the surface of the moon, block after block reduced to gray dust, only the great cathedral still piercing the skyline. For months, Allied reconnaissance flights had tracked what remained of the city's defenses, scattered Wehrmacht positions, anti-aircraft batteries, and tank traps guarding the roads to the Rhine. Cologne was both a symbol and a strategic prize, an industrial hub with rail lines feeding the entire Western Front. Whoever controlled Cologne would control the western crossings into central Germany. Under General Omar Bradley's 12th Army Group, the U.S. First Army prepared to take it. Operation Lumberjack, the final offensive to clear the west bank of the Rhine, had begun. As dawn broke on March 5th, the men of the 3rd Armored Division and the 104th Infantry Division advanced through the outskirts. The resistance they met was stubborn but scattered. German forces, short on ammunition, short on fuel, and short on hope. Many defenders were boys from the Hitler Youth or elderly men conscripted into the Volkssturm. They fought from cellars and half-collapsed buildings, ambushing American patrols with Panzerfausts, striking and vanishing into the smoke. The Americans moved cautiously. Sherman tanks and half-tracks rolled forward, their engines echoing through empty streets. GIs went door to door, searching for snipers, prisoners, and civilians still hiding beneath the ruins. Cameramen from the U.S. Signal Corps captured every moment. Their black and white reels would later become some of the most iconic footage of the European campaign. Now restored in full color, we see what they saw, the surreal combination of life and death, chaos and calm. Soldiers laughed briefly, posing beside mannequins pulled from the rubble of a bomb department store. Others searched the pockets of fallen German troops. The smell of smoke and fuel hung thick in the cold spring air. By March 6th, the Americans reached the inner city. The mighty Cologne Cathedral, Kölner Dom, rose above the ruins like a blackened monument to survival. It had been hit by 14 bombs, yet still stood, scarred but defiant. Around it, entire neighborhoods were gone, an ocean of twisted steel and shattered stone. It was here, in the shadow of that cathedral, that one of the most famous tank duels in history took place. An American M4 Sherman tank was moving cautiously through the city center, unaware that a German Panther tank from the 2nd Panzer Division lay hidden nearby. The Panther, with its thick frontal armor and deadly 75mm gun, fired first. Its shell struck the Sherman head-on, killing the gunner and setting the tank ablaze. Smoke billowed into the streets. The moment was caught on film by Sergeant Jim Bates, a U.S. Army cameraman riding nearby. His lens followed the Panther's turret as it turned, scanning for more targets. Then, a few blocks away, a new sound, the heavy rumble of a T-26E3 Pershing tank, one of the first of its kind ever used in combat. The Pershing's 90mm gun swung into line. It fired. The first round missed. The second hit. Flames erupted from the Panther's hull. A third shot finished it. The duel lasted less than 20 seconds, a fleeting moment that would become one of the most studied combat films ever recorded. The two tanks, the defeated Panther and the victorious Pershing, came to symbolize the twilight of Nazi Germany's armored might. But for the men on the ground, there was little time to reflect. Street fighting raged on. Every intersection had to be cleared, every doorway checked. German snipers, concealed in attics and church towers, continued to pick off advancing infantry. American artillery pounded suspected positions, reducing what little was left of the city to dust. Civilians emerged from their basements after days of shelling. Most were weak, malnourished, and terrified. They watched the Americans pass, unsure whether to fear them or thank them. Some raised their hands in surrender, others simply stared, hollow-eyed, at the end of the world they once knew. Footage from the following days shows the strange duality of victory. Soldiers resting against shattered walls, smoking cigarettes, laughing for the camera, just streets away from bodies lying unburied in the rubble. As the Americans pressed toward the river, German engineers blew up the Hohenzollern Bridge, Cologne's vital link across the Rhine. The blast tore the iron structure apart, sending its arches collapsing into the water below. It was a symbolic act, a final gesture of defiance meant to slow the inevitable. By March 7th, the city was secured. The Battle of Cologne was over. The U.S. First Army had captured one of Germany's largest cities in just 3 days. But the cost was enormous. 90% of Cologne had been destroyed, 20,000 civilians dead, tens of thousands homeless. Only about 40,000 people remained in a city that had once been the fourth largest in Germany. The American troops who occupied it found an eerie silence. Streets once filled with trams and church bells were now reduced to dust and debris. Tanks rolled over portraits of Hitler littering the ground. The Nazi banners had vanished, replaced by the stars and stripes. In the following days, engineers and medics arrived. They cleared mines, searched for survivors, and set up aid stations. American officers worked with local priests and Red Cross volunteers to feed the hungry and bury the dead. Meanwhile, just 40 miles south, U.S. forces discovered the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen still standing, the only intact bridge across the Rhine. 10 days after Cologne fell, they would seize it, forcing a crossing into eastern Germany and sealing the fate of the Reich. The fall of Cologne marked a turning point, the moment when the war's end became inevitable. And yet, amid the ruins, there was something more profound, a glimpse of survival. The cathedral, miraculously still standing, became a beacon of hope for a nation on its knees. Even as Allied troops occupied the city, Mass was held inside its blackened walls. For the cameraman who filmed it, and for us who watch it today, these restored images are more than history. They are memory brought back to life. We see the exhaustion in the soldiers' faces, the disbelief in the eyes of the civilians, the smoking wrecks of machines that once symbolized power. We see the cost of war, not in maps or medals, but in ruins, in silence, in the human soul. When peace finally came, Cologne began the long process of rebuilding. It would take decades for the city to rise again, stone by stone from the ashes. Today, the same streets where tanks once burned are alive with people once more. Trains run again across a new Hohenzollern bridge. The cathedral towers gleam in the sun. Yet beneath the surface, the memory remains, not just in monuments, but in every photograph, every reel of film, every quiet echo of that fateful march in 1945. This is not merely a story of victory. It is a story of endurance, of destruction and rebirth. Cologne fell in 1945, but it rose again. And in its rise, it carries a message that echoes through history, that even in the darkest ruins of war, humanity finds a way to rebuild. This is the Battle of Cologne, the city that fell, the city that burned, and the city that refused to die.